Graham Hunter is here. How are you, Graham?
I'm grand, thanks. Are you?
I'm okay. I'm okay. Let's talk first off about Lionel Messi. It's kind of a conversation we've been having for quite some time this year, but it sort of feels that the news is getting more and more real. So, just this question for you: of all the times you've seen these Lionel
None
Messi,
taken.
of all these Lionel Messi stories you've seen over the last few years, where does this particular one rank in terms of legitimacy? It definitely feels up there in terms of the most legitimate links.
That's a beautiful intro. Right, we'll try and make this real, okay, and not like all the previous conversations on. Look, it's much simpler than that. Than the you want me to go on the Messiometer. We
Yes.
don't need all sort of gadgets and swings. And he was 33 the other week. His contract allowed him to walk away free at the end of this season, even though he's got one more year of contract. It was written in this get out clause. As long as he notified them by the end of May, he didn't do that. Immediately, that didn't happen. The club naturally, because as poor a president as Bartomeu has been, he doesn't want to leave in 1 year's time because his mandate is also up. It's interesting how his contract runs out in a year's time. Now, he is mandated that he must resign in a year. They must call elections. That's obligatory. He doesn't want to be the president who is branded as the one that let Messi go. So if Messi doesn't renew, then by next summer, not only will there be a free-for-all, it'll be a blemish on Bartomeu's record for all time. So immediately, May finished and the pandemic allowed Barcelona to come back and train and play and plan and work together again. They started to try to talk to him about a new contract. And Messi's people said, no, we're not interested. Stop. Go away. Forget it. They didn't say, we're leaving. They said, we're not interested in talking right now. And immediately that leaked out. To be fair, when it leaked out on the Crossbar show on radio, pardon me, where they, despite often being on between 11 p.m. and 1 a.m., they still get 1 million listeners. It was reported as, at the moment, Messi doesn't want to think about staying. At the moment, Messi, and the clarity that needs to be brought into that is that he should be looking around at 33 at his options. He should, rather than be thinking about whether he can up his gross annual income from 100 million to 120 million. He's got two, I keep saying two when I talk about this, but at 33, he can still look utterly brilliant. He will become, at the end of this campaign, he'll be Barcelona's most important player. He'll probably be La Liga's best player. The weekend's exploits mean that he now has his fingerprints on, I think, 52 goals between those he scored and assists this season alone, a season in which he's lost a lot of time to injury. He's turned 33. He's in a deeply declining team, and he's deeply dissatisfied with what he sees around him. This will go down as a statistical mark to equal some of his other marks of pure genius that we've seen. So that's the situation. There's no need for speculation or is he definitely leaving. We're in a moment where currently ranked the world's best player, given that he's the Ballon d'Or holder, and still extraordinary at 33. He's looking around, and I say, why wouldn't he? You know that. You don't need to be reporting on La Liga rather than based in Dublin to see the logic of him going, I'm going to check my options because I'm not going to throw away 2 more good years when I could be winning trophies, when I could be doing special things, if this squad isn't going to be better, if this club's not going to be better run.
There was a report in Argentina over the course of the weekend that Manchester United could make an offer of up to £120 million plus 2 players. You had Pep Guardiola asked about it, and he says he hopes he stays in Barcelona. You had a situation now where, as you say, he's going to go into his last year of his contract, which doesn't suit Barcelona either. So all these things are kind of coming to a head at the moment. Like, is there a club in world football at the moment who could A, interest Lionel Messi, and B, afford to bring him to the club? Like, I mean, interestingly, Lionel Messi probably comes with Champions League football. Manchester City might not have that to offer him. Outside of them, can you realistically see him going to Paris Saint-Germain? Maybe not, and that does leave Manchester United, and that link from the report in Argentina over the course of the weekend as one of the viable options, which kind of seems incredible given where they were a few months ago.
It sounds utter tosh to me. I
Mm.
mean, I haven't read it, and therefore I should be journalistically more respectful to another organisation. But Owen, if you put the magnifying glass on it, as you yourself were doing, what was the deal? You said 100 and what?
£120 million plus two players.
£120 million plus two players for a guy that's 33 and out of contract at the end of the season. Why wouldn't you wait a season and take him for free? Why wouldn't you start the contacts now? Why would you pay all that money? I don't understand it. I think there's a good argument that Leo Messi sitting right now saying to Barcelona, I don't want to renew because I'm not sure. I need time. Instead of trying to buy him, go to him and say, okay, in 12 months, we will take you. We will make your life heaven. We will be in a position to win the Champions League then, and we'll be able to show you a vastly improved squad, and you don't spend 100 and something million and nick out two players. I don't know. I can't see how that report. It doesn't make sense to me at all. It doesn't make sense to me at all. Manchester United is a venue for him. Maybe the club that has tried hardest to get him over now his entire career is Manchester City. It wasn't the case. Inter tried. Real Madrid tried when he was a youngster. Inter tried really, really hard. But Manchester City's owners, long before Pep was in charge, 2-3 coaches before Pep was in charge, were desperate to get Messi, put unbelievable financial incentives there for him, and still covet him. And I understand why owners would covet him. The ruling about Manchester City's participation in the Champions League patently is very important, and I'm not convinced at all that, taking what Pep Guardiola said about Messi, I hope he stays and completes his career at Barcelona. Take that aside. I'm not entirely sure what Pep Guardiola's view would be if you said, as owners, Pep, we're going to give you Messi. Outright rejection of it, no, but his plan of football is much more dynamic. Messi is a different kind of footballer. Genius though he is, he's a different kind of footballer than Pep inherited in 2008-9, different kind of footballer than when Pep left. It would mean a reorientation of how Manchester City play up front when they press, who does and doesn't track back. It would be a really big jump. And to be honest with you, if you said to me that during this season Messi doesn't renew his contract and Pep sees out his 1 year and it's a 1 year ban in the Champions League and Pep decides to move on because in due course he'll want to coach Brazil, in my opinion, and there's a new coach at Manchester City, Messi's out of contract and just turning 34, and Manchester City are back in the Champions League. If you said to me, is that a possible change? Possible. And Barcelona are still in a chaotic state? I'd say possible. But my opinion is that Messi will want to wait and see how the likely presidential winner, Victor Font, is shaping up during this year. He's going to wait and see what, if anything, Barcelona do in coaching terms this year, does City and stay or not. And Messi has got a bigger word now in how the team shape is. The weekend proved that. Messi asked City in for specific tactical changes. They were granted. Griezmann moved in the centre, played next to Suarez, Messi in behind. Jordi Alba got freedom down the left. They played as if it was 2015. It's one of the most remarkable switchbacks from playing horribly to playing convincingly that I've seen. And therefore, we're in a state of flux. If you want to talk about other clubs and where Messi might or might not go, that's fine as a hypothesis. But what's happening here is that Messi is surveying what he's got, surveying what else there is, and taking time to make a decision. And I think that's wise. I would say it'd be crazy to say, I'm just staying. The kids are happy, the family's happy, the lifestyle here is good. I owe Barcelona. I'm definitely staying for the last 2 brilliant years of my career. That would be naive, and he's not naive.
It's very interesting that he's had such a hand in the tactical shift, isn't it? Because I was going to ask you about the possibility that the new president of Barcelona, the power brokers, grant Messi his wish with a manager, whoever he wants to come in and manage the club. Xavi is who I'm thinking. Bring him back to Barcelona, give him to Messi as his manager. But the way you're talking now, it seems that perhaps Messi may have influence even with Setien.
You put me on dangerous ground there. If I'm completely honest, Xavi is such a shrewd beast that I think there's how can I put this carefully? A lot of received wisdom that Xavi's ideal stage of taking over is something akin to what Guardiola got in 2008, where some of the big beasts are no longer in your way. Now, Guardiola had to push out Ronaldinho and Deco. Situation with Messi is not the same. But my impression is that Xavi would really like a time machine so that he could start with 25-year-old Messi. But if he isn't granted that, then perhaps, how can I say it carefully and euphemistically, clear ground to make his own decisions about the style of play. Does that get the message across?
Just about, Graham.
And therefore, Messi is a new era, yeah, with space to make decisions that are fully his own. And look, Messi, let's not create a myth. I didn't mean to start the myth that Messi snaps his fingers and everything happens his way at the club. That's not true. But Setien was wise, given the mess of the playing style, given how disconsolate several players, Griezmann included, disconsolate, given the fact that Alba and Suarez and Messi were very nearly at daggers drawn with Setien and his volatile, mouthy assistant, Eder Sarabia. When Messi said, listen, coach, I think this will work. I want this to happen. That's happened time immemorial in football clubs and international selections where a senior player can say to a coach, this will work. And the coach goes, okay, I'm going to back you. So don't let that message sound like Messi's a martinet. That's not, he's a tough little tyke. And when you're in his bad books, coach, president, fellow player, doesn't matter. When you're in his bad books, you know. But what happened was constructive, creative, and it was right of Setien to go, okay, I listen, I see the tactical improvements, I see what you want, I see what Suarez wants, I see it. And they did it, and it worked out their treat. It doesn't mean that Messi runs the club, and it also doesn't mean that Messi's going to the new president. I point Xavi. I don't see that.
Right, it's a very, very interesting situation. Like the timing of when those two things happen is going to be very, very curious. And I didn't realise a lot of that. Like what we were going to get into, Graham, actually, was a little bit of Real Madrid. But I think what's actually probably more interesting with Real Madrid at the moment is possibly their post-Ronaldo life. If you look at perhaps the last few weeks in isolation, they've won all their games in the resumption. What is it, 2-0, 1-0, 1-0, 1-0 have been their last 4 wins. They've been robust in defence, only conceded 1 goal since the return. Does the post-Ronaldo life at Real Madrid look anything akin to how the post-Messi life at Barcelona will look? Or are the structures just so utterly different that you are not comparing like with like?
I think it's important to make that comparison because Real Madrid have ripped up what was the Galactico idea. They've got an engorged squad. They've got far too many players. I mean, once he takes good first team players back from loan, there's 30-something top quality footballers in that squad. And elite managers now like to have a maximum sort of 21, 22 with some kids around the fringes. Well, that's not the case at Real Madrid. And what's happened is that Florentino Perez's idea that with nation states owning clubs, there's a fighting chance that Real Madrid won't be always able to buy Galacticos because the Galacticos may now increasingly go as Mbappe did at a very young age before he was proven went to PSG. PSG managed to take Neymar. City spends slightly differently, but fair play aside, have a similar capacity. The idea of Newcastle being bought by the Saudis and automatically buying Neymar doesn't add up. But Florentino Perez anticipated that there might be more and more of these. And so he switched idea. And having lost Neymar, he hired a team of scouts to go to Brazil and said, bring me the next 3 Neymars. When the Empire strikes back, I don't want 1, I want 3. So he's got Renier, he's got Rodrigo, he's got Vinicius, all interesting, exciting young talents. He's got Taki Kubo out at Mallorca. Asensio's still only 24. If you look at Odegaard at La Real, he was playing brilliantly for the first half of the season. So what's coming now, they've just sold Ashraf to Inter when he could have walked back into that team because they think that Mondi is good enough. There is an influx of highly talented youth at Real Madrid. It's looking like they need to refine in very specific ways. There's not an awful lot of work needed to be done at Real Madrid, but because of the pandemic, the market shrinking, the amount of time you've got to do business, the amount of money that's around, how Real Madrid clear out 4 or 5, starting with Bale, obviously, they want to move him out. Starting with, the James Rodriguez wants to go to Atleti across the city, controversial move. The business they've got to do, this post-Ronaldo construction that you talked about, has been difficult for the first year, but now they're going to win what is only, I think, the 9th title since 1990. I think they will win it. Their 4-point gap is sufficient. I don't see them tripping up. It's still arithmetically all to play for, but Real Madrid's triumph this year will be very important in that post-Ronaldo context that you mentioned. What they've got is a structure. Valverde is still, I think, only 22. He's exceptional. Casemiro is still only 28. It needs retouching, nothing more. Really specifics, though. They need another striker. Jovic doesn't work. They need to have the pressure taken off Benzema. But that Real Madrid squad is exceptional. Asensio's come back from a year-long injury looking dandy, absolutely dandy. So if you're a Madridista or even a neutral who doesn't want to see Barcelona dominating all the time, Madrid paints you a really interesting next 2-3 years. And as the neutrals, never mind the team on the club crest, there are 2 or 3 footballers in there. Vinicius, Take, Renier carries a massive reputation, but he's still to be old enough to be pushing his way into that first team. Asensio. There are footballers to watch there that we'll be enjoying for 5, 6, 7 years to come. But the next 24 months paint is really interesting for Real Madrid.
And for Zidane as well, and for him to get the credit as a coach that perhaps hasn't quite been there on a global scale. Nobody talks about Zinedine Zidane as one of the great coaches in world football, and yet look at the success that he's had.
I think, Jerry, if it's all right to use the P word at breakfast time in Ireland, let me be pedantic. I'm not sure he's proven yet to be, sorry about that, everybody, just put the cornflakes down, just step away from the anger. I'm not certain he's necessarily, don't laugh, he's necessarily the world's greatest coach. I think he said it himself the other day, I was always a better player than I am a coach. I think what he is something that's still extremely special, that has become more important, and you can make a comparison with Ferguson, for example. Zidane is very, very good in terms of understanding his group, man management, but also I've used on your show the player whisperer idea that he's extremely good at reorientating somebody's concentration. I want this job from you. He's extremely good at taking the senior, wizened old pros and saying, we're not done here and we're not playing the way you want to. This is what I need from you. He's very good at creating a meritocracy. He's really good at promoting the idea that if training is good every day, we win titles. But if training is good every day, I'll give a premium to those who train well. There won't be the president bought me there, therefore I'm completely safe and I can do what I want. And that feeling has existed over the years at Real Madrid, and it's part of the reason that since 1990 they've only won whatever it is, eight titles. So Zidane's ability to get the best out of multimillionaires, some of whom can coast, some of whom can be disaffected because they're not playing 38 times a season in the league. These elements distinguish him, I think, from the rest. And his coaching, you can see that he makes in-game changes that are adequate. He's changed system a lot over I guess he's coached as the first team man in charge about 205, 206 times now. And in about 185 of those, it's been a different 11. So he loves to rotate. He loves to challenge. I think he can tweak that and occasionally go for spells of games where it's the same 11 or the same 10 much more regularly and become European competitive again. But he had them playing, and I think the cup idea, that's where you see him inspiring individual players, clusters of players, and I think it helps account for the domination of the Champions League they had, but they've lost. And I think that's how you distinguish Zidane, somebody who's very special and still involved in training. So his coach, David Bertoni, is on the side watching and instructing how the training sessions should be. But Zidane will be very much involved in the 1-2s, the setup, the short games, not to show off what he can do, but to say, I want the tempo like this. I want your touch to be like this. The shooting from distance is a big factor that he's introduced. Up until the last 2 games where opponents have closed them down, they were shooting at goal 15, 16 times on average every game and scoring from distance, I think, more than anybody in Europe. So he's an interesting man. He's going to be a successful man this season. It's wonderful to have him because he's elegant and funny for us who like to watch and chronicle what's going on. But I count him more as a player whisperer, as a man manager, than an elite coach.
One last point, Graham. This is a conversation that Ger and I found ourselves in earlier on. Let's just put it that way, where we were talking about this current Liverpool side, and we were talking about their 3 midfielders and how, if you compare football from between now and 10 years ago, I mean, the responsibility on the midfield is very different, because you look in the context of the Spanish team 10 years ago, one of the best midfields we've ever seen, whereas Liverpool play in a way that is en vogue, but is playing in a way that perhaps doesn't bestow as much responsibility on passing midfielders. First of all, would you go along with that? And second of all, then, if you had to transport that Spain team into current club football, how would they fare against the Manchester Cities, the Liverpools, the high-octane counter-pressing and things like that? Is it a totally ridiculous take to suggest that perhaps Spain were an outstanding team, but also perfect for their time?
First of all, okay, I take your second part of your question. It's a hypothesis, so we can have fun. But I've spent the last several weeks creating podcasts about 2010. I was there, I accompanied them all the way, but I watched all the training sessions. I think that Spain team, the first thing to say is that it's rare, it's not unheard of, but it's rare that you have your first 16 players in a squad like that are as good as that. I think that's rare. I think that another thing I've learned in subsequent tournaments with Spain is how rare it is to have personalities like that. Intensely hard, tungsten tough winners. Thirdly, that Spain team would win everything. Never mind the change of style of play. What Spain had to cope with then was banks of 9 and 10 in front of them. Barely anybody wanted to play. When Germany wanted to play, the score was only 1-0 because Germany were extremely good. But when they wanted to play, Spain's football was absolutely terrific. In my humble opinion, you had a 2010 side where David Silva was barely used. He was conducting his transfer to Manchester City. Del Bosque lost a bit of faith in him. David Silva had so much more to give to that team. If you look at his stats in the World Cup, well, Mata's stats in the World Cup, Javi Martinez's stats in the World Cup, basically didn't get any. Marcos Senna was, a fantastic player for Villarreal, got left behind at that stage. All I'm saying is that irrespective of the pace of football now, that Spain team yearned for clubs that come at you, that open up, that if not toe-to-toe, that don't sit and bank defences. They beat them. They beat Paraguay bank defence, Chile bank defence. Portugal were relatively defensive against them. And you no matter about how football changes, if you mix brilliance and utterly hard mentality, you win. You win enough. As far as Liverpool are concerned, you used the word responsibility, and then you qualified it by talking about passing responsibility. And okay, a lot of the passing is done by the full backs or Van Dijk. And teams are learning a little bit about how to play Liverpool. It's just like learning how to play them and being able to affect it and beat them or dull them is difficult. Liverpool's biggest enemy is themselves, because the responsibility for that midfield is an athleticism that we've rarely seen, a winning of the ball, and a speed of transition. And those 3 things jigsawed together mean that you individually and the guy to your right and your left and the guy who's on the bench need to be mentally and physically in an extraordinary shape. And patterns of great clubs have shown you need to renew that, because you can't keep a group of men playing at that level where it's all about intensity and mental focus, not genius, at the same level, winning level again and again and again for clutches of 4 or 5 seasons. It has to be the case that somebody better, somebody younger, somebody hungrier, somebody who's not used to winning, somebody who'll challenge you for your place must come in. So you were talking about playing philosophies. Liverpool's massive challenge now, because they've been brilliant. They are, in my lifetime, one of the 2-3 great selection selling outfits in terms of how to work academy and transfer market. They've been extraordinary. how do you retouch? Retouching is completely different from reconstructing. They've done the reconstructing. The finesse of saying that little change and that little change and this one in and that one out, or this one less bench time, that will be fascinating to watch. And the rivals will all be sitting going, ooh, we can trip them up now. They will, they will.
Yeah. Graham Hunter, fascinating stuff as always. Thanks a million for joining us.
Cheers.